So just for a few words on the Helsinki summit between Trump and Putin. Truly extraordinary. I didn't watch it live. I didn't watch sort of the live coverage, but there has, of course, been a lot of commentary on hourly news. I don't think it's got quite as much attention as the Singapore summit with Kim Jong Un. One reason for this, I think, is because with Kim Jong Un, there was ongoing barbs traded between Trump and Kim. So that came as a much bigger surprise that the two reached out the way they did. But with Putin, that shadow of Russian meddling in the American election obviously hasn't went away, and Trump is rightly or wrongly closely tied to it. Now, what I find extraordinary and what a lot of people have pointed out is just how subservient Donald Trump is appearing to be. It's unbelievable. It's like he's reading the same script as Putin. Um, these are both ego-driven leaders who don't have respect for a free press. I mean, Putin certainly doesn't. That goes without saying. He has the likes of RT to be his mouthpiece. In the United States and in Western democracies, the concept of a free press is obviously far more enshrined in what we consider to be a core democratic value. Now, I've always said I do think there are aspects of the press that are anti-Trump and that are biased against Trump, but for him to basically toe the same line as the Russian dictator, and okay, Putin got re-elected technically earlier this year, but you don't need to scratch too far beneath the surface to see how the Russian system operates. Um, Putin's been utterly dominant for the last 18 years in Russia, and Trump supporters will say, "Oh, but why not give him credit? He's reaching out." And on the surface, this would be the situation, right? You have the world's two biggest nuclear powers, two of the most powerful countries in the world. One is the sole superpower, and the other, along with China, is the second most powerful country in the world. So, on the surface, that would be a good thing to have their two leaders talking. It's better to talk than to, be at war, obviously. That would be fine if it was a level playing field and if it was a case of diplomacy with assertiveness. But what questions will Trump ask Putin at all? Certainly not publicly did he hold Putin to account for anything. Um, he basically served as Putin's apologist, and I think that is a complete disgrace. Former CIA Director John Brennan said it was tantamount to treason. John McCain was very scathing in his criticism, and so have many other people. A big part of this, of course, goes to the Finnish president. I mean, part of the credit for organizing the event. As an event, I don't criticize the concept. My issue is just how subservient Trump is seemingly willing to be. Now, Helsinki just took a series of photos. Actually, I always do this with historic occasions. Just trying to get. If you just bear with me a second. I have to say I find it staggering. Um, Helsinki, of course, has been used before for excuse me. Yeah, so going back to 1975, the Gerald Ford Leonid Brezhnev summit. Um, it was then used by Reagan Gorbachev in 1985 before the better known Reykjavik summit, and in 1997 between Bill Clinton and Boris Yeltsin. So Helsinki is well known for this. It's a city that's played an important role in diplomatic summits. The difference is on those previous occasions, notwithstanding Gerald Ford's absurd remark during the campaign that there's no Soviet domination in Eastern Europe, I believe that partly cost him the election. Um, I cannot think of any American president who's been so subservient to a hostile, powerful foreign opponent as Trump has with Russia. Um, I mean, he makes these statements like, I don't know, the gentleman, we'll see what happens. And before the meeting, he was playing it down himself. He doesn't have high hopes. But if it was a case of, okay, I'm reaching out to Putin, we need to talk, that would be one thing. But to do that at the price of not raising any concerns whatsoever about Russian meddling. In fact, basically towing Putin's line, going along with Putin's denials, despite the fact that exhaustive inquiries um, have found incriminating evidence, the fact that 12 senior Russian officials have been indicted. Um, it's astonishing. Now, people might point out to the fact that after the Skripal poisoning, the United States expelled Russian diplomats as evidence that Trump is not subservient to Russia, but that won't count in relation to PR and in relation to the public image of this. And the public image is that Trump is basically reading the same script as Putin. It's absolutely astonishing. He hasn't raised any concerns about human rights, Russia's crackdown of dissent. He hasn't raised any concerns about Russia's utter contempt for the sovereignty of neighboring states, for Russia's invasion of Ukraine, for Russia propping up the murderous Assad dictatorship, for Russia using its state sponsored media to stoke up mistrust and massive industrial scale disinformation in the West. You know, Trump likes to talk about fake news. He could start with the distortion of RT. I just find it staggering that Trump is so willing to be subservient. And yet, the other day when he was in the UK, what did he say to Theresa May? Oh, you should sue the EU. Um, I really think. I mean, Donald Trump is putting up the European Union to be the enemy of the United States, while simultaneously propping up Putin and legitimizing Putin. I would have no problem with Trump reaching out to Putin and saying we need to work together. Although, having said that, you know, he is now the fourth American president, whilst Putin has been leader of Russia. And every time American presidents have reached out to Putin, and every time they've had it thrown back in their face. The problem with Russia West relations comes down to Vladimir Putin more than Dmitry Medvedev, more than any other senior Russian official. It comes down to the persona of Vladimir Putin. This man is dangerous. And Trump, I believe, is now showing himself to be dangerous for Western stability. It's like we're throwing ourselves into the fire. I cannot believe. I'm really concerned about the future because at a time when we're leaving the European Union, we see the American president reaching out to Putin saying that the European Union is America's, basically portraying it as the enemy, taking cheap shots at Western allies. I'm not talking about disagreements, I'm talking about cheap shots that just help nobody. How does it help the situation when he's publicly defending Putin whilst publicly saying, oh, the British are in a mess? This is ridiculous. And only the most hardcore Trump supporters cannot see it. I mean, only they're the only people who are blinded by Trump's utter lack of leadership. Reaching out to Putin and getting this sort of detente would be fine if that was at the point of saying, but I'm going to raise these issues with Putin. I'm going to raise the issue of Russian meddling. I'm going to raise the issue of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. I'm going to raise the issue of Russia's disinformation and usage of cyber trolls. He won't do it. And that I find deeply concerning. It's just staggering, really. I'm shocked, but I'm not surprised. Um, so, how will this go down? I don't think it'll be as historic as the Singapore summit, although even the Singapore summit It's a real question mark as to how much the North Koreans have actually done since then. Um, Mike Pompeo's been overdriving in the diplomatic field. But the point about diplomacy, yes, it's about being responsible for your language. Yes, it's about reaching out to people. But it's also actually about being assertive about your own um, your own intentions and your own desires for the position that you want your country to be in. But for all Trump's talk of make America great again, what he is doing is publicly stoking up mistrust within the West. This is absolutely, when he denigrates the media to the point that he does, when he calls it all fake news, when he publicly defends Putin, as he has done earlier in Helsinki, it's just staggering. And I'll leave it there. I'm sure there'll be a lot more commentary with this. I'm sure there's other things that I could have said. That's always the case, with these sort of things. But be interested to see how the press cover this tomorrow.